I'm just going to turn this around. Okay. Hi, Chris. Wait, let's do it in here. Okay, I'm going to move my chair.
You over here.
I'm going to move in front of Shakti, the dogs.
Oh, bang.
Okay, so...
Is there a way to put this over there and it gets to
that's
sit
a
and have a
really good
conversation?
practical idea. Okay, so I asked Chris, I was like, hey Chris, you are a pretty amazing dude who's had some pretty, like, intense experiences. Chris is someone I know who has had a lot of very powerful and embodied experiences and also has a lot of knowledge when it comes to spiritual systems and traditions and all of that stuff. And so I asked him, I was like, Chris, do you see common stages of awakening for people on the spiritual path, and what are they?
And then she went, do you want to do a Facebook Live? And I freaked.
And then he did clearing.
And I retched. And now I'm doing my first Facebook Live. Yes, retched energetically. I should actually back up and go, we just went through a couple of models, which is the Kashmir Shiva Tattvas for how all of existence comes from nothing into the fullness of something and back again and does it in every second. Then we talked about the Wilbur-Combs lattice of stages and stages and states. So there's like we have these different lines of development, whether I'm a really good chef, or I'm really good at sex, or I'm really good at maths, or music, and that they go through these reliable, repeatable stages of development. And you contrast that with states. So I can have a non-dual experience of my body or of nature and the subtle realms and all manifestation, or I can have it of ultimate consciousness, right? Different structural stages. And then you're like, come on, is there really a common thing?
Yeah, let's talk about like the human
experience.
What happens to human people in your experience when they're going through this stuff? Like, what are some of the things you see? What are the experiences they go through? Like all of that jazz.
First, it starts with wine.
Yes.
And for me, it starts and ends with wine, but that's just me.
True.
Yeah.
Chomp Trumper would be proud.
And basically, it comes down to suffering. So,
God. Coming there. Scorpio in the house.
The summary version, because like all the tattvas and even give you this lovely round circle feeling, and the structure stage view gives you, it's just this ladder of growth and development, and I'm just constantly climbing up the hill, and it gets brighter and happier, and everything's lovely, and rainbows and puppy dogs and unicorns and shit. Whereas the actual experience is death. And it's a repeated series of dying.
Okay, stop.
To who you were.
Let's start at the beginning.
Well, this is the beginning.
So for you, the beginning, like what you see in people, is like the beginning of the spiritual journey is like this stage of like coming into bliss and coming into enjoyment, and then
No.
So what would you say is there a common thing that you see?
Well, look, I'm a tantric who rails against the whole Buddhist fundamental truth. I'm more like, let's actually have the bliss and the love and the light. Let's actually invoke the pleasure while we're here, while we've got a chance. But in reality, if I was to put a general map up and make it simple, my view is we start with dissatisfaction. We start with some kind of rotting out of being okay with where we're at. At some point we go, this is not enough. Whatever it is, the relationship, my work, my sense of self, my capability, something stops working or not working good enough, and we have this fundamental core dissatisfaction. Even if we don't call it that, there's some gnawing, there needs to be more. You could see it possibly as desire, as a hunger, as I'm really hungry for this, I really want to know the truth. Well, why? Because I fucking feel like I haven't got the truth, right? There's this lack. So if we can accept that there is this ouch, is what's actually driving most of us. It's a need that's wanting to get met, an itch that needs to be scratched, if you want to put it simply and metaphorically. And then that takes us through the levels of the basic levels of our being. We go through like the dark nights is probably the nicest way to sum it up. The dark night of the senses. It's like just seeing and having this material stuff. It's not enough. I've got a body, but I'm not happy with it. And we actually then have a death process, which actually is like a retraction of our attention and energy going out through the physical senses, and it comes back within. But it can be disorientating and confusing, and then I've got energy happening, and what's this that's going on? I've got all these emotions running through me that I've never had before.
So it's a waking up to people beyond, for certain people, like a waking up beyond just this physical here and now.
Yeah.
Okay.
And for everyone it starts there. So this is a bit of that stage logic. You can't skip this stage. We all get born, we all start and plenty's like good.
I feel like
Go
I had to learn that I was physical. Like for me it was a bit different, but you know.
Okay, but I'm pretty sure if we teased out your story.
Look at you like.
You asked me for a model, you know, and I'm
Okay.
like, I can make you fit the model.
I will make you fit. Anyway, please keep going.
Yeah.
What you're sharing.
Yeah, so but your lived experience, and as your self-narrative will be, I'm trying to get here, I'm trying to be more embodied. And it's been my journey too. I'm a transcender, I'm inherently up and out of here, and give me spacious and freedom, and don't tell me about I need to do homework or fucking work for a living and all this shit. And what is this body that aches and does things and needs to be tended to? Why can't I just pour wine down its gullet 24/7, you know? It doesn't quite work, you know, so well. So that's a descent process, and that's where the involution model from Geshe Shavis is probably pretty useful for you.
Mm-hmm.
But still, if you actually go back to your lived experience, you're probably bumbling along and not even really that aware of having the psyche structures that were very dependent on the senses, and then there was a crumbling of that. The world was no longer just as apparently given. Right? It's not just the physical realm, just there, what it is. It's like, oh, there's something else happening. There's something subtle happening. There's energetics, at the very least there's emotions, right? And from that we can get a connection into energy.
Mm-hmm. So in your experience, when you've witnessed people going through this process, for instance, if they haven't really been aware of their emotions, look at your face. Like,
Oops.
so what do you see happen for those people at that stage?
Eruptions and confusion, and it can be very disorientating, and it looks like breaking down, it looks like failure, it can look like very often mental illness. There's this eruption of stuff in my psyche, I don't understand it, I don't know how to make sense of it, I haven't got skills, I'm not being met in it, and so on. Right? But we've come from the model we were brought up in, and we were okay with the physical senses, and we're having the dark night of the physical senses, and you're coming into your emotional, energetic being. And yeah, it can be terrifying. And then you ride the currents of that, and eventually you have this organic learning of like, oh, okay, I can be more than just those senses, I can be this much sensory awareness, I can have these other flavours occurring, and I can be okay even as I'm apparently changing. And you start to get this intuition of a deeper sense of the I that is, you know, transcendent from or present to in all of manifestation. So you get these glimmers from the word go. Again, that's the states, then back to stages.
I'm having this sense, and I don't know if it's going to go this way, but I'm having this sense as you're talking of like the awakening being through, like in yoga, for instance, in Tantra, they talk about the five bodies. Some say the 7 bodies. But
some say 3.
Yeah, everyone has a different version of how many bodies they've got. But they talk about the 5 bodies: the physical, the pranic, the emotional / astral, and the mental, and the causal. And like as you're talking, I'm like, is this like an evolution through the bodies?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So what comes
and I don't call it evolution. I'll talk to the human experience, which is the what's hard about it is that the sales brochure says, la, it'll be great. You'll now have all this range of feeling. You'll have all this range of subtle energy experience. Your orgasms will be off the chart. Heck, I put it in my sales material, right? You know? But the lived experience is a death.
Yes.
Because you must die to the old and open. Right?
Yes.
And that's why we're at home by ourselves going, why is everyone else so happy and I'm fucking suffering and maybe it's just me and I'm fucked up. It's like, no, congratulations. You just fucked up beautifully. You opened, you know, and walk into the next layer of stuff that's going to come out. And the next level of what's been not able to move in your experience yet, releasing its pent-up pressures, its backlog of wanting to be felt, heard, known, seen, and experienced and lived. So yeah, basically it's the bodies, and you could subdivide it, 3, 5, 10, 12. I find it useful just to think from the dark night of the senses, the dark night of the psyche, which is the whole emotion, energetic, and even really the subtle realms sense. So even if you're clairvoyant, clairaudient, etc., all of that subtle manifestation. Then into the dark.
Can you, just for people who don't know, who are watching, who don't know as much about that, because we just spoke about like the dark night and the physical and the senses into the emotional. Can you talk about going from the emotional into what sounds like the more psychic? Is it psychic / mental, or?
Yeah, mental and psychic.
Yeah.
If you want to zoom in a little bit, I was going to zip through and do 4 levels and be done, but okay, we can add more, because that's where most of us live our lives from. This is actually a lot of the lived experience. What can I say about it? You can think of it as emotions and energy. There's an argument whether, depending on perception, whether in a ladder sense, there's the physicality and the emotions and the energy, or is it physicality, energy, and the emotions? I tend to describe it as actually structured as physicality to energy to emotions, but when you're relating to it, it's like there's the physicality, there's the emotional layer, and then there's energy. And if you move the emotions around, you get results in both the other 2 layers. So just a word about that. Then there's your sense making. So what happens at this level? Some people, all sorts of weird stuff starts happening as you go from, you can have energetic activation, you start working with emotions, you're doing embodied work or embodiment work of some type, which from my point of view may or may not have anything to do with being embodied as an identity, as a being, but you've got an energy body and an emotional body being worked, that's great. And then the mental body. And so the mental body's coping with this adjustment. Cool, that's just more about, this is happening, I've just got to reconcile it's happening. You just need some good counselling, you need some other friends, some reflections, some normalisation techniques, read some books that go, this is a thing, watch a video like this, it's a thing. Just normalises it, helps you get mental models that accept it. There's obviously insert a lot more mental work you can do, the whole NLP industry, most of it's psychotherapy, and on we go, right? So I'm not blithely dismissing it, I'm just saying this is how quickly we're moving through the levels.
So in terms of like the mental level breaking down, does that look like, as opposed to like the dark night of the senses, it's being like, oh fuck, I'm not just this physical body, or the emotions, like whatever that, I'm not sure what that would look like by your model, but like in terms of like the mental stuff, is that like the breakdown of worldview, beliefs, values, all of that stuff? Like,
yeah.
Well,
if I was to put it, because the way the mental comes through the whole journey, so it's generally there through the process, so it goes through its own mini version of a death. So there's actually this fractal effect that's going on. We're often very much living in our mental bodies in this life, so we experience it in the mental bodies at each time we go through one of these deaths. So just to note that recurrent factor. But the actual shift from being in the mental body, so you may have had physical, energetic, emotional, you got your mental body functioning, and there's a breakthrough into the subtle level proper. And when I had this first happen for me, I was a teenager and I experienced waking up, and I was actually in paralysis, my entire body was actually asleep, and my energy body was ripped out of my body, and I was thrown around this room, and I'm like, hang on, I'm actually in my room, but I can see my body's there, and I can feel that I'm paralysed, and I'm not able to move and do anything about it, and something's doing this to me. But so I'm having this both separation anxiety and terror, as well as this sense of paralysis that I can't do anything about it, and ability, the impotence that's there. And something like that's pretty common as a scary introduction, but it really is separating out and showing you the identity exists in the subtle body. And it might be facilitated by any number of unpleasant things, or taking a really good drug trip or a bad drug trip, and so on. So, but then there's a whole lot of conceptual identity that needs to die, and hold belief structures around I am just this, and the world's nicely safe and secure and contained and reliable and certain, and oh fuck, as soon as we actually open up to the subtle realm, what happens to your sense of time and space? Things can be interpenetrating, so people get off on all sorts of trips. I'm being invaded by entities, and this is going on, and that's going on, and all sorts of paranoias and all sorts of other very real things that are also happening in the subtle realms. Which, before that death into it, or breaking open into it, you're able to blithely ignore, and safely, pretty much, to a large degree. But once actually the light's on and your identity's lit up in that level, you're a more tasting morsel for existence to interact with, to play with, to eat. So that's a view of subtle. There'll be much better ones, I'm sure. And then from subtle we get to causal, and causal sounds like the dissolution of everything, that we're going into a void state, we're going back into source potentiality.
So the causal level, for people who don't know, is regarded as like the soul level, the level of like where our soul is the container for everything else within us. Yeah.
And this is then the traditional dark night of the soul. So we have the dark night of the senses, and often they just go to the dark night of the soul. But there is the dark night of your identity or your sense of individuality as you open up. I'm not sure what I can't remember right now what the regular frame is, maybe someone can tell us. So the dark night of the soul, and then at this level, a lot can be said about it. This is the proper ego death, right? So any sense of this individuated me that has an embodiment gets broken open. And it's not that you actually stop being in a body, although that does happen, or any of the bodies, physical, energetic, emotional, mental, subtle, but that they're no longer fixed, they're no longer contained, you're actually permeable to space. So you can actually dissolve as a sense of identity and experience into being spacious awareness, which is absolute freedom. It's nirvana. Or
terrifying.
Yeah. It's the absolute end times death of your...
I haven't fully integrated my own ego death, so it's like...
You can see why I'm talking about general stages of death. Yes. Yeah. It can take a while to realise that, oh my God, I've just uncut the basis of any sense of meaning and any sense of individual agency, and what's this? Nothing's ever happened, nothing's ever happening. I'm essentially stepping out beyond or at the edge of time and space. And they often talk about the world stopping or the universe stopping. And actually have that experience. And I was actually, ironically, walking towards a tram line in San Francisco when I had the experience, then looking down over a big area and the world stopped. And I was more aware of emptiness and space and not existing, and the sense of no time moving, no space moving, than I was of the physical realm or any other subtle realm. And it's still this huge impression on my psyche as I go to recall it. So that's pretty terrifying. It undercuts everything. And then you see where a lot of gurus and people who get yogic powers go, cool, ultimately there is no meaning and there's no bloody rule book and it's all empty space anyway, so it's like, woohoo, it's free for all. I'm absolutely free, I can do whatever I like. Well, it's free at the soul level, but at the every other embodied level, it's not free. There are conditions, it's conditional reality. And it's the skew-if interpretation of the mind. Remember I mentioned the mind has this circuitous relationship through the whole thing, that interprets the absolute freedom of the soul as my absolute freedom of my body. I should be able to do whatever I want. I should be able to take your body and eat this thing, and I'm going to live forever immortally as a physical being. You get these distortions that come through. Anyway, they're an issue of the mind, but an interpretation. But beyond that is then finally the dark night of your whole being.
Gosh.
Yeah, oh
this is
God,
so enticing. It's like,
Indeed.
I love, my friend Matt said to me once, he had this quote from Chogyam Trungpa, and I'm like totally paraphrasing it, but what he said was, Chogyam Trungpa was quoted as sitting in front of a room of meditators and being like, who of you is new to this? Like, who of you has never done this before and however many people put their hand up? And he was like, turn back now. Like, just stop. Just stop, guys. He was like, turn back now, because like once you get on this path, like you can't stop it. Like you can't stop the awakenings once you're on the path. So like, and it fucking is painful and blissful and everything, because that's what life is. So like, if you haven't got on this path yet, turn around and go back.
Stop watching this video.
So,
don't tune
turn
into
it off.
us.
Turn it off.
Don't attend our any of our events. Because it's viral. It just spreads like wildfire.
Spirituality, dude, just spreads.
It's
Anyway.
worse than influenza. You know.
So it's worse than Stacey. So then you have
Psychic Stacey.
Psychic Stacey.
Oh, don't get me started.
She's so
So
at like
spiritual.
the mental level of her awakening. Anyway,
I don't know. I reckon she's like all the way.
I'm like all the way. Anyway, so you were saying then is the dark night of total being.
Yeah, don't have your whole being, and it's where there is still, even at the soul level, there's this remnant of this feeling, witness, consciousness. This, in my experience anyway, there's still at least a awareness of things, and so there's a passage through the void, the absolute no self. Which is where a lot of enlighteners will tell you is the ultimate point, and it's a really depressing place to get stuck, frankly. If you get lucky, you get pulled through the other side, and shit gets really mystical and magical from there. And it is actually worth it all.
You look so happy.
Yeah, well, it's like, but it is a dark night of your whole being, and the very sense of it having any identity. So you may have lost your sense of agency. I can't have this embodiment, but there was still an identity sitting there. There was still an I. There was still this individual soul. There was still some containment, even outside of a sense of time and space, or at the intersection of it. You can argue about it, I'm sure. But then it's like the crumbling of all existence, and even that. So any sense of God dies, any sense of me having a soul or being someone goes. And that's that, through that void. There's some really deep primal layers of insanity and confusion and terror in that, which where a lot of meditators get stuck. And you often need, a teacher to push you through, pull you through, or a lover to smash you through blissfully or unblissfully. It happens a lot. It's really difficult.
What are some of the practices that you've heard of teachers give? I mean, obviously, it's kind of like a redundant question, but I'm going to ask it anyway, like, because it would be specific to each person. But like, what are some of the things that you have heard teachers give to people when they get to that level, and they're like, "I'm fucked." Fuck you, God, you don't exist.
Depends on the teacher, because a lot of teachers will try and bring you back down to an earlier level, to where they're comfortable with, and they can keep you contained, and they won't do it consciously. That's actually been my experience. The next level is, it's literally, and this is offered at the street level, it's satsang. It's actually just conscious abiding. It's just being in the presence of another being, and just releasing into that, and having that reflection naturally showing up. And okay, you're going to crumble and die, and it's all lost. Great, sit on the floor and be a puddle. And now you're erupting into ecstasy. Excellent, that's good too. And there's this energetic modeling, or presencing, or communion and permission giving and reflection giving, and all of those things probably, and probably a bunch more besides, that seems to enable this divine goddess head to come to see and embody and reflect itself in relationship.
Sounds like loving care.
Yeah.
Sounds like just being really nice to someone,
The golden rule, do unto others as you
at a
have
simple
them
level.
Yeah.
So do you think that people can fluctuate between these stages and go in and out, or does it seem...
Yes, yeah. So a couple of things. This is a general wash, a general trajectory, but parts of our being might be stuck at being two and haven't caught up yet. You know, and it's like that part, that line of my development, or that sub-personality or aspect of me, and maybe it's my sexuality, maybe it's my culinary skills, maybe it's my ability to deal with conflict, however you want to frame it, or subdivide lines of development, they go through the stages at different speeds and different times. And so different parts of us are going through it at different times. Where I come to try and make sense of all that is what I've tried to map out for you is, in the background I'm talking about levels of identity. So I'm actually tracking your sense of identity. I am just a physical being. No, I'm a physical, energetic, emotional being. I'm actually really also got mental, and I've got this whole subtle being going on. Oh, I've got a causal body as well. Oh, I've got this super causal body, and even that explodes open. That's the dark night of the whole being.
Just then when you said the whole being, it registered in my being as not like of my being, but as my being.
Yes.
Like as in everything that I am, which is everything.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, you get it.
Got it.
And this might sound like mad talk, but if you get the transmission, or you clue into it, you get a felt sense of it, then that's, or an intuition of it in consciousness. And it's like, that's what you're talking about. Got it. Everyone else thinks probably crazy.
Yeah.
Hi.
It's okay.
She dared me into doing it. So I'm like, I don't clear it. I'm okay with it. Wow. I'm about to do some vulnerability after clearing. Vulnerability hangovers. Anyway. Yeah, so I'm actually really talking about that level identity. And so that line of development in particular through these broad stages of the dark night of the senses, the dark night of your mind and into the subtle realms, and the dark night of the soul, and then the dark night of the total being. And what happens then? Great. It's almost like this whole, if you have that as a ladder, the ladder collapses and the whole thing falls down into itself, and there's no differentiation as much anymore, there's no separation anymore. Identity is present in all the levels. And so you can actually be consciously the body, the emotions, the mind, and not consciously witnessing them and able to move them around like most embodiment practices are doing. I'm embodying stuff. Well, cool, I'm using my mind and my consciousness to control my body, or control my energy, or control my emotions, right? Or I control subtle things, and therefore I'm working in that body. But what I mean by embodying is identity, that I'm actually present as that.
Yes.
From inside out, like the innate intelligence of each of those levels is opening and activating. And then, because you fundamentally open at that, the deepest level of your being, identity as is the main chokehold, you know, on our evolution or unfoldment. I don't think we're evolving anywhere in particular.
It's the part of the evolution, and then also becomes the chokehold on the evolution.
Yes.
Yeah.
Go there.
Yeah.
Is it actually opens up things, anything that's at different levels of development of its own unfolding, to start popcorning open. You've taken off the ultimate lock, and so then all of a sudden all sorts of issues can come up. Oh my God, I've got this problem I never knew existed, or I've got this capacity I never knew was there, I've got this interest that's suddenly growing, and so all these different lines and aspects, all these different sub-pockets of like sub-personalities or split off bits of identity, little bubbles wanting to rush through to the surface that's now open.
Yeah, because we're experiencing our infinite self, which is like infinite.
Unfolding, and then you've got more and more and more. And that's where it gets really interesting. So back to your question, I had to go on a bit of a diversion, but people will be surging forth and back in these basic layers of death, of, you know, sensory death, death of the senses, death of the ego, death of the soul, death of the total being, and then parts of them will be going through it at different times.
Yes.
So it's not so simple and linear, and it's not step by step, it's freaking messy, and people will go, it's a spiral, and I go, yes, and it's a lot messier than that too.
There's like multiple spirals
in different directions
going up and down.
And what it means to me is that we can actually make room for each other and ourselves. You know, we can actually compassionately go, cool, how are you exploding into unfolding and existing? Wow, you're being hungry to go there first. I would have dealt with that personality defect. You know,
Yeah. So essentially, the whole journey is about becoming yourself to just be yourself.
Yes. And it all goes nowhere anyway. So the sun blows up and the universe ends apparently.
I know, it's
And,
so funny. Like, what the fuck?
But it's the ultimate road. I was thinking about this because you've come back with this existential fucking what's the point of my life? America's rejected me, you know, thing, right? And I was thinking about your situation the other day, and we were talking about existential issues. Like, well, what's the point anyway? If it goes anywhere, and you actually get to the realization that there is, you're outside of time and space, nothing ever happened.
Yeah, what's the point?
Why would you do anything, you know? But there is this ultimate romantic gesture of self-enjoyment. You know, I get to actually make this connection and make this offering, and we get to experience something like that. And it was the ultimate romantic gesture. What I got to is the meaning of existence.
Oh, it's so nice.
Sweet, isn't it?
The whole point of life is a romantic gesture. Such a tantric.
Futile romantic gesture, but you know, romantic nonetheless.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Thank you, anyone who actually bothered to listen. You know,
There
even if you're hating
there are
it.
currently 4 people on here, and there are a few comments. Anyway, so I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope it benefited you. And yeah, I'm going to unlive you now. So goodbye.